The conflict between Mendeecees Harris and Yandy Smith is bursting louder than ever, and fans everywhere are left with the same unanswered question even if the cameras have stopped rolling. Is one of the most famous couples in love and hip-hop ending? In a startling development, rumors of a furious lunch dispute have emerged, exposing tensions that even the most devoted fans never anticipated seeing. Imagine entering a drinking conversation that should have been peaceful, only to see tempers flare over the tiniest things, words pierce deeper than anybody imagined, and emotions erupting like a hurricane that is ready to engulf all in its path. According to insiders, Yandy has had enough of fighting by herself and has reached her breaking point. Mendeecees, who is aloof and defensive, appears torn between keeping his marriage intact and leaving. Friends, family, and fans are all split on the change in their relationship's dynamic, from loving to explosive, from tender to tense. Was this just one more dispute gone too far? Or are we seeing a connection that was established on the most merciless but brightest spotlight? Watch closely, because what happens next could make all the difference. The tension between Yandy and Mendeecees was too strong to be concealed by the restaurant's subdued hum. What started off as a straightforward meal swiftly turned into a spectacle that nobody at the table could have anticipated. For the first time in a long time, Yandy didn't bother to cover up the cracks in her voice as she sat down, sighing and her eyes heavy with frustration. She was at her breaking point, she said, leaning forward and whispering nearly to herself but loud enough for Means to hear. The tone was set by those remarks, which hung in the air like smoke, choking and lingering. Was going to happen. Mendeecees, who always maintained his composure in public, went for his glass as if her words had fallen on his chest rather than just on top of it. The words were powerful. The truth could no longer be ignored or dismissed with a laugh or a smile. This wasn't an argument over housework or a light-hearted argument about what to watch on TV. This fracture, which had been gradually growing, was now visible in the light of day. Fans were shocked when they learned about this discussion from online snippets and murmurs, unable to comprehend how a once unbreakable pair could suddenly seem so vulnerable. Known for her strength and ability to keep things together, Yandy showed a side that few people had noticed. She acknowledged that she was weary of constantly bearing the burden of defending their love, always the one to bandage injuries that didn't seem to go away. She was relatable to everybody who had ever experienced intense love because of her honest confession, yet believed that the affection was not reciprocated. When she brought up the incident, which at first glance appeared to be almost insignificant, the tension further increased. Water in a glass. She said how something as simple as reaching for her drink had become a source of contention and a sign of how brittle their relationship had been. It may have sounded trivial to others, but in that instant, it was the spark that started a fire that neither could put out. Mendeecees leaned back and said she was exaggerating, that little problems had been magnified into something they weren't supposed to be. His face was a mix of bewilderment and annoyance, but his remarks just made the rift wider. He seemed more defensive the more he defended himself, and Yandy wasn't in the mood to have her feelings disregarded. She bluntly told him that she didn't feel love from the energy he had been giving her lately. It was not secure. It didn't seem encouraging. It seemed like apathy covered with harshness. His tone revealed the displeasure he was trying to hide, despite his best efforts to deny it. Each word became into a stone that rose between them like a wall, rather than drawing them closer together. Each sentence distances them. This has nothing to do with water, or even regarding a single dispute. It was about sacrifices that went unacknowledged, about years of unresolved pain, and about a love story that was put to the test in ways that neither of them had expected. When Yandy's voice broke, this time from tiredness rather than rage, the atmosphere changed. She informed him that she had been standing up for them against rumors both in public and privately, from family members who questioned them, from acquaintances, and from a persistently speculative audience. She claimed that she felt as though she was on trial every time she entered a room, defending a marriage that didn't appear to be able to defend itself. Mendeecees shook his head in an attempt to clarify that he couldn't control the gossip and didn't care what other people said or thought. However, that wasn't the purpose. Yandy also ensured that he comprehended. She wasn't requesting that he dominate other people. She was pleading with him to prove to her that their relationship was worthwhile, deserving of defense, and worth the effort. She desired to believe that they were in this together rather than as if she were alone with the burden. An image of two individuals who loved each other very much but couldn't manage to connect their hearts emerged as their voices soared and dropped. Online viewers of the exchange relived Yandy's statement that she couldn't continue to be the only one fighting. Many people found resonance in that sentence, which became a rallying cry for those who understood what it means feeling hollow after giving your all in a relationship. Online debate erupted in comments. Some people applaud Yandy for voicing her truth at last. Mendeecees was defended by some who said he was simply fed up with the continual conflict. Social media became a battleground of viewpoints that reflected the couple's own differences, experiencing in the actual world. However, there were glimmers of vulnerability that suggested the possibility of recovery even in the midst of this tempest. Mendeecees briefly dropped his guard to declare that he was done fighting, despite his frustration. He stumbled over his apology, demonstrating how inexperienced he was at expressing regret. Although it wasn't a big show, it was a tiny rift in his armor, suggesting that he might secretly still wish to preserve what they had. Although Yandy heard it, it was insufficient. She needed more than a brief apology or words to break up a quarrel. She required evidence, consistency, and action to support assurances. She desired to understand that he shared her desire to create a secure and caring environment for their family. Nor was the conflict between them limited to the two of them. Their children, their extended relatives, and even their fan following were impacted as it spread. The Yandy was troubled by the idea of their children growing up in a world where there were always fights. She stated that she wanted their kids to see a loving, stress-free environment. Mendeecees was struck hard by that remembrance, and his eyes briefly softened as if the gravity of what was at stake had finally set in. However, pride still got in the path. Rather than fully accepting what she had said, he sidestepped it by claiming that he had been at odds with her since the start of their relationship, long before she even knew it. Who had given more, who had suffered more, and who had sacrificed more became the focus of the back and forth. There was no winner in this cycle. Just two individuals remained trapped in a never-ending cycle of unresolved grievances. The question that followed completely altered the tone of the discussion. Yandy inquired if they wanted space as she glanced across the table, looking for any indication of commitment in his eyes. No argument could overpower the ensuing stillness. Men took a while to respond, and that hesitation said a lot. Yandy said that the absence of an answer was sufficient for her, leaning back with a hardened expression. The future of their marriage was on the line, and hope was on the verge of dying in that moment. Timelines were overflowing with shocked replies from those who witnessed this incident online. Others who don't believe that such uncertainty could be faced by a couple who formerly represented resilience. It seemed as if the entire weight of their past had fallen on this one vulnerable moment, making it seemed like they chose their home first in rooms that tried to split them apart, she added, taking a calm, deliberate breath. In rooms that attempted to separate them. The air bent once again as that line touched down. Around them, you could sense a crackle, the kind that occurs when long-held emotions collide with reality. Yandy said that she was worn out from hearing about him in public. She heard about meetings that never reached their living room, and she smiled through murmurs that were more knowledgeable than she was. Jokes that are spoken in circles a bit too casually, where her ring appeared to be irrelevant. He scowled and said that the world loves to add fire to any little spark, and that rumors weren't proof. It wasn't about proof, she said. It was about faith, about not waiting for a fire alarm and instead turning to her when the smoke began to rise. Although he nodded, his jaw tightened. He added that there were other aspects of her that baffled him. Judgments that seemed to be made alone. From where he stood, actions taken for protection appeared to exclude him. The door had never been locked on him, she informed him. His knocking had just stopped. They were no longer alone. Uninvited but inevitable, other names sneaked in. Puerto Rico now sat like a third chair in the center of their table, which is why Scrappy appeared. The vacation was intended for space, clarity, work, distance, and air that might be different from the one strangling her here, Yandy explained. Mendeecees' distance had never saved anyone who refused to turn around, he added, raising an eyebrow. He inquired whether she wanted him to stop her from becoming the anchor she constantly requesting him to be. She said, maybe distance didn't save you, but sometimes it made you honest. An anchor that only drops when the boat is already in motion, she remarked, meeting his gaze. His lips parted, a hint of sorrow flickering there, and he mumbled that he detested how poetry their issues were becoming while their remedies remained simply and doggedly realistic. Drifting isn't an anchor, it's a memory. The opinions of their pals reverberated through the pauses between their remarks. When they last went out, a straightforward half-joke regarding who was in charge at home was introduced by Toast. It came from a tongue that knew better, and while it wasn't cruel, it wasn't nice either. He had laughed along, Yandy recalled him. How his laughter had stamped down on her. Every laugh is not always an endorsement. Sometimes it's armor, he remarked. Armor worn for too long turns into skin, she whispered. I don't want to be the version of myself that everyone else has edited, he remarked, massaging his temples. He kept trying to compose a draft, and he wanted her to see it. Even now, she informed him, she could see it. Additionally, that was why everything was painful. Disappointment is nothing new when love is there. The house keys belonged to a frequent visitor. Timelines surged and phones lit up all around the city. A narrative that was a bit too personal was posted by a buddy who ought to have known better. And all of a sudden, the video of their lunch was floating around the internet like a note in a bottle. Every syllable's tone was decoded by strangers. In lengthy paragraphs, supporters vehemently defended each position. After calling to express her prayers for peace, a relative unintentionally disclosed that she had heard another rumor, which made Yandy feel like a cute angle. Mendeecees stated that he did not like to face a public trial once more. Here was where he wanted to be heard. She concurred. Nevertheless, the public trial had already begun. Judgments adorned with emoticons and passionate responses that amplified the already loud situation was. Neither of them missed the irony. Being observed threatened to destroy what initially made people care about them, which is why they were well known and adored. A waiter set their food on the table in the silence between calls. Neither of them was hungry for gorgeous, but the platters looked lovely. Yandy added, I used to love how he studied me while picking at a leaf. He used to set an alarm for her flights in the early mornings, she recalled. She claimed she missed that stability, but he wanted to be awake to say, call me when you land, not because she asked. With a sorrowful smile, he acknowledged when a movie began on Sundays. He missed the way she would put her phone down and return to the couch, as if the world could wait until the credits rolled. Somewhere along the line, he said, they both allowed parts of themselves to be stolen by the world. And where their fingers had been, there were now spaces when they held hands. She extended her hand over the table anyway, palm up, as though to demonstrate that hands may still contact despite gaps. After reaching and hesitating, he put his hand in hers. It was a slight touch, but it made the sharp objects softer. However, the softness did not make the heavy go away. Logistics were seated in the corner. Family dinners, school schedules, holidays, and occasions where their names were printed next to each other, as though paper could help people stay in queue. Yandy stated that she wished to shield the kids from whiplash, which is a type of turbulence that educates young hearts to anticipate abrupt declines. I never wanted our house to be a place where doors learn to slam more than they learn to open, Means concurred. He proposed counseling as a tool set rather than as a surrender. He claimed to be fed up with learning the most difficult lessons without a guide in real time. She gave a nod. She said that counseling only worked if their truth rather than the version they put on to survive came in with them. This was the first genuine yes she had given in days. He vowed to deliver his truth, even the portions that made him feel ashamed, even the behaviors that appeared robust but were actually just boots of fear. A separate truth fought for attention behind the pragmatic rhetoric. His mother and he had had a conversation that swiftly got out of control. Yandy kept reliving a chat. She felt disregarded, like an overreacting person. He thought she had attacked. Words cut like cables. As though the memory itself were delicate glass on the table, they went over it again with care. Yandy clarified that she wished to avoid division. Alignment was what she desired. Instead of being the last to defend, she wanted him to lean in first when she talked. Choosing a side seemed like cutting off a limb, he admitted, so when his family became noisy, he fell silent. Marriage asked you to grow new limbs, not cut old ones, she said. You were requested to carry the individuals under both hands on your roof. For once, he listened without offering a counter-argument. I hear you, was all he said, and he allowed the words to have some meaning. Amidst everything, a small change occurred. Not a cure, not a miracle, but the kind of shift that occurs when people begin to use complete sentences rather than short phrases. "I didn't manage pressure well," he remarked. He acknowledged that he had assumed her power had no end and had so taken it for granted. She claimed that she had misinterpreted his quiet as a sign of apathy when, in fact, it was sometimes just his inability to identify the thing that frightened him. He requested that she teach him how to name it without assigning grades for his initial tries. Despite the messy outcomes, she wanted him to demonstrate her effort. Their shoulders drooped little and their gaze softened. Reconciliation was not what it was. It was the taking out of superfluous armor, a clearing where a way might be possible. However, a possibility is not a guarantee. Like a jet circling a runway, the idea of Puerto Rico lingered. She clarified that she might still go, but only to breathe, not to run. He inquired as to what she wanted him to accomplish in her absence. According to her, she wanted him to begin by addressing the minor issues that weren't really minor. Rescheduled a meeting that normally took precedence over dinner and give the therapist a call. Inform your friend, who likes stirring things up, that the kitchen was closed. He promised to carry out those actions. What would she do? He asked. She promised to switch off her phone after 9 o'clock. Instead of waiting for him to guess incorrectly, she should write down what she truly wanted from him and stop listening to the noise to confirm her concerns. They both nodded, not ceremoniously, but in a calm agreement that is genuine without the need for witnesses. Upon receiving the bill, Mendeecees, he reached for it first, not out of custom, but because he had a mission to finish without discussion. For the first time that afternoon, he steadied his hands and slipped his card inside. Yandy claimed she didn't want the public to win, as she gave him a weary but present face. He laughed, not at her, but with the despair of someone who had finally realized how big the competition was. They stood, not exactly side by side, but not apart either, and walked out into a day that looked exactly the same as when they walked in, despite the fact that nothing felt the same. He remarked, "The public only wins if they stop talking in private." She responded, "Then let's not stop." The light outside had changed slightly, enough to create shadows. Their steps matched, and they were longer. The sound of two people still debating what to save and how was measured and quiet. There was a peculiar stillness in the air outside, the kind that follows a storm yet retains the smell of rain. Mendeecees and Yandy moved cautiously down the pavement, neither hurrying nor dragging, as though they were both terrified that they might lose the delicate beat they had just discovered if they go too quickly. They walked shoulder to shoulder, carrying the burden of unsaid words between them, not holding hands but not drifting apart either. Automobiles went by. Ignorant of the immense tension that yet persisted, people laughed on patios, and the city's normal hum went on. To their flesh. As they came to a corner, Yandy paused, turned to face him, and subtly inquired as to whether he truly understood her statement that she was exhausted. It was the weariness of carrying a weight that never went away, not the need for sleep. Mendeecees gave a nod, but his silence spoke louder than words could. Words could be anything. In the park, they discovered a bench where the grass was illuminated by patches of sunlight that broke through the clouds. The heavy air was punctuated by the laughter of